3 months after the meeting at Harmony Point, Zephyr 9 stood before the Confederation High Command, knowing that his words would likely end his military career. The Great Chamber housed representatives from a dozen species united only by their commitment to maintaining galactic order through superior firepower. They had summoned him to explain the growing crisis that threatened to tear apart 3 million years of military tradition. Admiral Blue Prime of the Andromedans spoke first. His 6 eyes focused on Zephyr 9 with the cold intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "Commander, your sector has experienced the highest defection rate in Confederation history. Entire battle groups have abandoned their posts to join human forces. We require an explanation for this unprecedented breakdown in military discipline." Zephyr 9 had prepared for this moment during the long journey to Confederation headquarters. His crystalline mind had processed thousands of battle reports and analyzed the patterns that had emerged from contact with human forces. The data told a story that the High Command would not want to hear. The human military methods are superior to our own in every measurable way that affects long-term strategic outcomes, he announced to the shocked assembly. They have achieved something we considered impossible, a form of warfare that strengthens civilizations rather than weakening them. The chamber erupted in angry voices as representatives from various species demanded explanation for such an absurd statement. General Krex IV of the Centauri Empire slammed his armored fist against his speaking podium hard enough to crack the metal surface. "Impossible," he roared. "Humans are primitives who have barely mastered interstellar travel. They cannot have developed military techniques superior to systems perfected over millions of years of galactic warfare." Zephyr 9 activated his holographic display and began showing statistics that painted a devastating picture of Confederation military effectiveness. Rebellion rates had increased by 300% in sectors where human forces operated. Military spending had tripled as resources were diverted to suppress growing unrest among conquered populations. "When we fight using traditional methods, we create fear, resentment, and the need for constant suppression of subject peoples," he explained. "Every victory requires more resources to maintain than the previous one. We are locked in a cycle that weakens us with each success." The display changed to show human recruitment and alliance data. Species that joined human forces remained loyal through choice rather than compulsion. Military spending decreased as voluntary allies contributed resources instead of consuming them through resistance activities. When humans fight, they create respect, admiration, and willing cooperation. Their rules of warfare are not restrictions. They are weapons of mass conversion that transform enemies into allies through demonstration of superior values. Admiral Blue Prime demanded practical evidence for such claims. Zephyr 9 had anticipated this request and prepared documentation from the recent engagement at New Geneva, where traditional Confederation tactics had been challenged by human alternatives. The battle recording showed Commander Pete Anderson facing overwhelming odds as his small human force defended a civilian evacuation point. According to military logic, he should have either fought to the death or surrendered to preserve his troops for future engagements. Instead, Anderson did something that shattered every precedent in galactic military history. He transmitted all human defensive positions and tactical codes to the attacking Confederation fleet. Then he offered medical supplies from his remaining stores to treat Confederation casualties from previous battles. The result was instantaneous and total. The entire Confederation attack fleet defected on the spot, not through coercion or bribery, but through moral shock at encountering an enemy who prioritized their welfare over military advantage. "Observe," Zephyr 9 told the stunned High Command. Anderson converted 8 battle cruisers and 47 escort vessels in less than 30 minutes. No Confederation commander in history has achieved such a decisive victory through traditional warfare methods. General Krex IV studied the recording with growing bewilderment. "This is impossible. No species prioritizes enemy welfare over their own survival. It violates every principle of evolutionary psychology." "That is exactly why it works," Zephyr 9 replied. "Humans fight according to principles that transcend survival instinct. They demonstrate that civilization is possible through voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. Most species find this concept irresistible when they encounter it." The chamber fell silent as representatives processed the implications of what they were witnessing. If Zephyr 9 was correct, then the foundation of Confederation power was built on obsolete assumptions about the nature of conflict between different species. Commander Vex 7 of the Hegemony Intelligence Division spoke with carefully controlled urgency. Commander, are you suggesting that showing mercy to enemies is somehow more effective than destroying them? That treating opponents with respect produces better military results than demonstrating superior firepower? Zephyr 9 nodded slowly. His crystalline form reflected the harsh lighting of the command chamber as he delivered the most devastating assessment in Confederation military history. We have been fighting like predators for 3 million years. Humans fight like shepherds. They do not simply defeat their enemies. They transform them into friends. This is why they continue winning, until every species in the galaxy adopts their approach or is left behind by those who do. The High Command spent 6 hours reviewing evidence that supported Zephyr 9's analysis. Battle reports from across the galaxy showed the same patterns: human forces converting enemies through demonstration of superior values, traditional military units defecting rather than continue fighting according to outdated principles. But the final proof came when Admiral Blue Prime attempted to order Zephyr 9's execution for treason. Half the chamber guards refused to carry out the command. They had been exposed to human military codes during their service and could no longer justify killing someone for speaking truth about the failure of their system. 6 months later, Zephyr 9 commanded his ship under new rules of engagement based on human military protocols. His crew had initially resisted the changes but became enthusiastic converts after witnessing the effectiveness of principled warfare in actual combat situations. The test came when they encountered a desperate pirate fleet attacking civilian shipping near the Outer Rim territories. Traditional Confederation response would have been simple: destroy the pirates and write off any civilian casualties as acceptable collateral damage. Instead, Zephyr 9 followed human protocols that prioritized preservation of life above military efficiency. He offered the pirates food, medical aid, and honest employment in exchange for ending their attacks on innocent vessels. The pirate captain, Vash 2, stared at the offer in complete confusion. His species had survived through violence and theft for generations. The concept of enemies offering help instead of destruction challenged everything he understood about the nature of existence. "Why would you help us?" he demanded during the negotiation. "We were trying to destroy your ship and kill your crew. Why do you not simply eliminate us and continue with your mission?" Zephyr 9 surprised himself with the sincerity of his response. "Because humans taught us that strength comes from converting enemies into allies rather than destroying them. Allies are always more valuable than corpses. Dead pirates cannot contribute to galactic civilization, but reformed pirates can become productive members of society." The negotiation succeeded beyond all expectations. The entire pirate fleet joined Confederation forces as auxiliary medical and rescue vessels. Their knowledge of hidden routes and secret bases proved invaluable for locating other criminal organizations that threatened civilian populations. But more importantly, they became enthusiastic advocates for human-style warfare among the criminal communities they had once belonged to. Their testimony convinced other pirate groups to seek similar arrangements rather than continue fighting hopeless battles against forces that offered redemption instead of destruction. As his ship departed the Outer Rim territories with a former pirate fleet now flying medical rescue flag, Zephyr 9 realized that the humans had accomplished something greater than military victory. They had performed the impossible. They had made warfare itself more humane, more effective, and ultimately more powerful by making it moral. His crystalline mind had been shattered by exposure to human military logic and rebuilt into something completely new, something better. Something that retained the tactical expertise of 3 centuries of combat experience while adding principles that made that expertise serve civilization rather than destroying it. Across the galaxy, the transformation continued to spread from ship to ship and fleet to fleet, not through conquest but through the simple radical idea that how beings fought determined what kind of civilization they could build together. The humans had won more than a war. They had won the future by proving that moral strength was the foundation of all other forms of power. And in his rebuilt crystalline consciousness, Zephyr 9 carried that truth toward whatever challenges awaited them among the stars. Zephyr 9 requested a meeting that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. He transmitted a formal diplomatic request to Captain Rodriguez asking for face-to-face negotiations aboard the neutral trading station Harmony Point. The irony of the station's name was not lost on him as he prepared to confront concepts that had shattered 3 centuries of military certainty. The meeting chamber was simple and functional: 2 chairs separated by a small table, in a room designed for species that breathe different atmospheric mixtures. Zephyr 9's crystalline form reflected the soft lighting as Captain Rodriguez entered wearing the blue uniform of the human space fleet. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen combat, but her eyes held something that Zephyr 9 was only beginning to recognize: compassion for those she had been forced to fight, regret for violence that had been necessary but never desired. It was a combination that made no sense according to Confederation psychology. "Commander," she said as she took her seat, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I hope we can find some way to end the hostilities between our peoples." Zephyr 9 studied her face for signs of deception or weakness. His tactical training had taught him to look for advantages in every interaction, ways to exploit enemy psychology for military gain. But Captain Rodriguez showed neither fear nor aggression, just patient willingness to listen and discuss. "Your tactics are inferior by every mathematical calculation," he stated bluntly. "You limit your firepower. You protect your enemies. You sacrifice tactical advantages for abstract concepts that provide no survival value. Yet somehow you are winning battles that should be impossible to win. My algorithms cannot process this contradiction." Rodriguez smiled and poured 2 cups of coffee from a thermal container she had brought. She offered one to Zephyr 9, who accepted it despite having no biological need for human beverages. The gesture was another puzzle. Sharing resources with an enemy violated basic survival instincts. "Commander, you are measuring the wrong variables," she said after taking a sip of the hot liquid. "You count ships and weapons and immediate tactical gains. Those are important, but they are not the only factors that determine the outcome of conflicts between civilizations." She activated a portable holographic display that showed recruitment and defection statistics from across Confederation space. The numbers were staggering. Entire fleets switching sides, species abandoning alliances that had lasted for millions of years, military units refusing to follow orders that violated human standards of conduct. "We are not just fighting a war, Commander. We are fighting for an idea. The idea that how you achieve victory matters more than whether you achieve it. That strength comes from principles rather than firepower. That civilized beings can choose to be better than their survival instincts demand." Colonel Jack Sullivan joined the conversation from his position near the door. The human tactical officer had been studying Confederation military doctrine during their journey to the meeting. His analysis was devastating in its simplicity. "Sir, every time your forces follow traditional warfare doctrine, you create enemies among your own people. Every act of cruelty generates resistance that requires more cruelty to suppress. You are trapped in a cycle that makes you weaker with each victory." Zephyr 9 felt his crystalline mind struggling to process this concept. The Confederation had maintained order for 3 million years through superior firepower and willingness to use any method necessary to defeat opposition. The system had proven effective across thousands of worlds and hundreds of different species. "Your analysis ignores the reality of galactic politics," he replied. "Fear maintains order. Mercy is perceived as weakness, and weakness invites attack from those who would take advantage of it. We learned these lessons through millions of years of evolution." Lieutenant Commander Emma Stevens entered the discussion with data files that she had been analyzing during the trip to Harmony. Her intelligence background had given her access to information that painted a different picture of Confederation effectiveness. "Commander, your system requires constant application of force to maintain control. Our research shows that Confederation military spending has increased by 40% over the last century, just to suppress rebellions and maintain order. You are not maintaining a stable system. You are barely containing a growing collapse." The numbers she displayed were accurate and damning. Zephyr 9 recognized the data from his own military reports. Resources that should have been used for exploration and development were being diverted to suppress populations that grew more restless with each passing year. "The human approach produces different results," Stevens continued. "Species that join our alliance do so voluntarily and remain loyal because they believe in our principles. We do not need to spend resources suppressing them because they want to be part of what we are building." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward and spoke with quiet intensity. "Commander, your people fight for control. You fight to dominate others through superior force. We fight for something completely different. We fight for the right of all sentient beings to live according to principles that make civilization possible." She brought up images from recent battles where human forces had demonstrated their unusual tactics, soldiers risking their lives to save enemy wounded, medical teams treating casualties from both sides with equal care, commanders offering surrender terms to opponents who had shown no mercy to others. These are not weaknesses, Rodriguez explained. They are our greatest weapons. Every time we show mercy to an enemy, we demonstrate that a better way is possible. Every time we risk our lives for our principles, we prove that some things are more important than survival. The revelation hit Zephyr 9 like a physical blow to his crystalline structure. The humans were not fighting to win in any traditional sense. They were fighting to transform the very nature of what winning meant. Their goal was not conquest but conversion. Not domination but demonstration. You are attempting to change the fundamental nature of galactic civilization, he said slowly. You want to replace survival-based logic with principle-based behavior. This is not military strategy. This is cultural revolution. Colonel Sullivan nodded grimly. That is exactly what we are doing, Commander. We learned long ago that military victories without moral victories are temporary at best. You can conquer a people, but you cannot hold them unless they choose to be held. Force creates resistance, but principles create loyalty. The meeting continued for hours as human officers explained concepts that challenged everything Zephyr 9 had believed about the nature of conflict between species. They showed him battle reports where human forces had won through conversion rather than destruction. Tactical analyses where enemy forces joined human units mid-battle after witnessing their conduct. But the most disturbing revelation came when Lieutenant Commander Stevens displayed psychological profiles of Confederation defectors, officers and soldiers who had abandoned their posts not because they were losing, but because they had seen something better. Commander, these people are not fleeing defeat, she explained. They are fleeing towards something they want to be part of. Your system offers them order through fear. Our system offers them purpose through principle. Given a choice, most sentient beings prefer meaning over security. Zephyr 9 studied the profiles of beings he had known personally. Loyal soldiers who had served the Confederation for decades before encountering human forces. Their testimonies were consistent and devastating. They had not been conquered. They had been convinced. The meeting ended with Captain Rodriguez making an offer that completed the destruction of Zephyr 9's worldview. She extended her hand across the table in a gesture of respect, and spoke words that would echo in his crystalline consciousness for the rest of his existence. Commander, we are not your enemies. We are your future. The question is whether you will join us willingly, or force us to demonstrate that our principles are stronger than your weapons. Either way, the galaxy is going to change. The only choice you have is whether to be part of that change or be left behind by it. As Zephyr 9 returned to his ship, he carried with him the terrible knowledge that everything he had fought for was already lost. The humans had not defeated the Confederation through superior technology or tactical genius. They had defeated it by offering something better. Something that made beings want to become more than they had been before. The war was over even though the fighting continued. The humans had already won by changing the rules of what victory meant. News of human warfare spread through the galaxy like wildfire and dry grass. Every species had communication networks, and those networks carried stories that challenged everything civilized beings thought they knew about conflict. Tales of enemies shown mercy instead of being destroyed. Reports of warriors who risked their own lives to save those who had been trying to kill them. Zephyr 9 found himself at the center of a growing crisis that had nothing to do with military tactics and everything to do with the nature of civilization itself. His own crew began asking questions that had never been asked before in 300 years of Confederation service. Lieutenant Crack 7 approached his commander during a routine patrol near the Centauri system. The young officer had served under Zephyr 9 for 15 years and had never questioned an order. But something had changed in his crystalline features, something that looked almost like doubt. Commander, I have been studying the human military codes, Crack 7 said quietly. Their rules about treatment of prisoners seem to produce better results than our standard interrogation methods. Subjects who are treated well provide more accurate information than those who are tortured. Zephyr 9 felt another fracture appear in his mind. The idea that kindness could be more effective than cruelty violated everything he had been taught about extracting information from captured enemies. Yet the human documentation provided extensive evidence supporting this claim. That is impossible, he replied, but the words felt hollow, even as he spoke them. Fear is the most reliable method for ensuring cooperation from hostile subjects. Crack 7 held out a datapad containing human research on interrogation techniques. The humans have conducted extensive studies, Commander. Torture produces false information because subjects will say anything to stop the pain. Respectful treatment builds trust and leads to voluntary cooperation. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert from the bridge. A human medical ship had entered their patrol zone broadcasting distress signals. Standard protocol required immediate destruction of any unauthorized vessel, but something made Zephyr 9 hesitate. The ship was clearly marked with red crosses on a white background. According to human documentation, these symbols indicated a non-combatant medical vessel protected under their laws of war. The ship was unarmed and posed no military threat to anyone, but regulations were clear. All unauthorized vessels in Confederation space were to be destroyed without warning. No exceptions had ever been made in the 3 centuries since the policy was established. Mercy was weakness, and weakness invited attack from other species. "Weapons ready, Commander," his weapons officer reported. "Shall I fire?" Zephyr 9 studied the display showing the human medical ship. It was small and fragile compared to his warship. One shot would vaporize it completely, but something in the human documents made him pause. These beings had rules about medical vessels. They treated such ships as sacred even when operated by their enemies. "Hail the vessel," he ordered instead. His communications officer looked surprised but opened a channel to the human ship. A tired female voice responded immediately. "This is Dr. Sarah Martinez aboard the medical vessel Mercy. We are responding to distress signals from the mining colony at Alpha Centauri B. Our sensors indicate multiple casualties requiring immediate medical attention. We request safe passage to provide humanitarian aid." The name of the colony sent a chill through Zephyr 9's crystalline form. Alpha Centauri B had been attacked by Confederation forces 3 days earlier. The miners had refused to pay tribute and were being taught a lesson about defying galactic law. No medical aid had been sent because the casualties were considered an acceptable consequence of their rebellion. "Dr. Martinez," Zephyr 9 found himself saying, "are you aware that the casualties at Alpha Centauri B include Confederation personnel as well as civilian miners?" There was no hesitation in her response. "Commander, we provide medical care to all sentient beings regardless of their political affiliation or military status. Our oath requires us to help anyone who needs healing." Crack 7 leaned forward at his station. "Commander, she is offering to treat our wounded soldiers, the ones injured in the assault on the mining colony, without compensation or conditions." This was beyond anything in Zephyr 9's experience. An enemy offering to heal the soldiers who had been attacking her own people. It challenged every assumption about the nature of conflict between different species. No one helped their enemies. No one risked their own safety for beings who were trying to destroy them. "Permission granted," he heard himself saying. "Proceed to Alpha Centauri B with our escort." The medical ship changed course toward the mining colony with the Confederation warship following at a safe distance. Zephyr 9 watched through long-range sensors as the human doctor and her team worked frantically to save lives. They treated Confederation soldiers with the same care they showed to civilian miners. When a Confederation officer was brought in with severe injuries, Dr. Martinez spent 6 hours in surgery to save his life. The same officer who had ordered the bombing of civilian areas just days before. She worked with dedication and skill that amazed the medical staff from other species. But the real shock came when 3 more Confederation ships arrived at the colony. Their commanders had heard about the human medical vessel and came to investigate. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about warfare. Captain Vash Prime of the destroyer. Dark Thunder watched human medical teams working alongside Confederation medics to save lives on both sides of the conflict. Enemy and ally treated as equally deserving of care. No discrimination based on species or political loyalty. "This is impossible," he transmitted to Zephyr 9. "How can they treat our people after we attacked their colony? Why do they not let our soldiers die as punishment for their aggression?" Zephyr 9 had no answer that made sense according to Confederation logic. But he was beginning to understand that human logic operated according to different principles entirely. Principles that seemed to produce results that pure military thinking could not achieve. The medical operation continued for 3 days. Human doctors worked without rest to treat casualties from the mining colony conflict. They shared their advanced medical techniques with Confederation personnel and taught them new methods for treating radiation poisoning and plasma burns. On the 3rd day, something unprecedented happened. Captain Vash Prime formally requested permission to switch sides and join the Human Alliance. His crew had voted unanimously to defect after watching human behavior during the medical emergency. "We cannot continue fighting for a system that treats wounded enemies as acceptable losses," he explained during a transmission to Zephyr 9. "These humans have shown us what civilization actually looks like. We want to be part of something better. 2 more ships followed within hours. The destroyer Night Stalker and the cruiser Iron Fist both requested to join the human forces. Their commanders cited the same reasons. They had seen an alternative to endless cycles of violence and cruelty. Zephyr 9 found himself commanding the only Confederation vessel still loyal to the old system. His own crew looked at him with questions in their eyes. Questions about whether the humans might be right about the nature of warfare and civilization. The crisis deepened when reports arrived from across the galaxy. Human tactics were spreading like a virus through military forces of dozens of species. Soldiers who had witnessed human behavior were returning to their home fleets with demands for changes in policy and procedure. The Zalarians had formally adopted human rules for treatment of prisoners. The Mokari Collective had banned the use of civilian shields in military operations. Even the brutal Centauri Empire was reconsidering its policies regarding medical neutrality. What had started as first contact with a primitive species had become a galactic revolution in military thinking. The humans were not conquering through superior technology or larger fleets. They were conquering through the power of ideas that other species found impossible to resist. Zephyr 9 stared at reports flooding in from across Confederation space. Mutinies on ships whose crews refused to follow orders that violated human standards. Defections by entire battle groups who wanted to fight according to principles instead of pure survival instinct. The impossible had happened. A species that handicapped itself with mercy and compassion was destroying a galactic empire built on 3 million years of military efficiency. They were winning by being better rather than stronger. And deep in his crystalline consciousness, Zephyr 9 realized that his own mind was beginning to change as well. 3 days passed while Zephyr 9 studied the human documents. His crystalline mind worked day and night trying to understand concepts that seemed designed to make warfare less effective. The Geneva Conventions alone contained hundreds of rules that actively prevented military forces from using every available advantage against their enemies. The most confusing part was how these humans treated their opponents. According to their laws, wounded enemies had to receive medical care. Prisoners could not be tortured for information. Civilian areas were off limits even if they contained military targets. It was like fighting with one hand tied behind your back on purpose. His tactical computer ran simulation after simulation. In every scenario, the human rules led to longer conflicts, higher casualties, and reduced chances of victory. Yet somehow these beings had traveled across space and built colonies despite handicapping themselves so severely. The first test came when mining station Epsilon 7 sent a distress signal. Pirates had attacked the facility and were taking hostages. Standard Confederation protocol was simple: destroy the station to eliminate the pirates and write off the hostages as acceptable losses. Clean and efficient, but the human ship New Hope immediately requested permission to attempt a rescue operation. Captain Rodriguez offered to send a boarding party to save the civilians without destroying the entire facility. Zephyr 9 agreed mainly because he wanted to see these impossible human tactics in action. Sergeant Danny Torres led the human assault team. His squad of 12 soldiers moved through the station corridors with weapons ready, but something was different about their approach. Instead of killing everything that moved, they carefully identified targets. They avoided areas where civilians might be harmed by stray shots. Zephyr 9 watched through security cameras as the humans encountered their first group of wounded pirates. The logical response was to finish off the enemies and continue the mission. Wounded opponents could still fight back or warn their allies, but Torres did something that broke every rule of military logic. "Chen, get over here," he called to one of his soldiers. "These pirates need medical attention." Private Amy Chen stared at her sergeant in disbelief. "Sir, they were shooting at us 30 seconds ago. Why are we helping them?" "Because they are no longer combatants," Torres replied as he applied a medical bandage to a wounded alien. "They cannot fight and they need help. According to our rules, we have to treat them." Zephyr 9 felt his crystalline mind fracture slightly as he processed this information. The humans were providing aid to beings who had been trying to kill them moments before. It made no tactical sense. It violated every principle of survival that had kept species alive for millions of years. The rescue mission continued with more impossible behavior. When the humans cornered the pirate leader, they offered him surrender terms instead of simply executing him. Captain Steve Martinez of the boarding party even guaranteed the pirate safe passage to a prison facility, where he would receive fair treatment. "You are insane," the pirate leader said as human soldiers placed restraints on his arms. "Why do you not simply kill me and be done with it?" Martinez looked at the alien with something that might have been pity. Because killing prisoners is wrong. Because you have rights even as our enemy. Because that is what makes us human. The words echoed through the station corridors and into Zephyr 9's crystalline consciousness. These humans fought according to principles that had nothing to do with winning or losing. They fought according to ideas about right and wrong that seemed more important to them than survival itself. The rescue operation succeeded. All civilians were saved. The pirates were captured alive and would receive medical treatment before being transferred to proper prison facilities. By human standards, it was a complete victory. By Confederation standards, it was an inefficient waste of resources that should have been handled with orbital bombardment. But something else happened that Zephyr 9 had not expected. Word of the human rescue spread throughout the sector. Other species began talking about these strange beings who risked their own lives to save others, who treated enemies with mercy instead of cruelty. 3 more incidents followed over the next week. Each time the humans chose tactics that seemed designed to avoid maximum damage to their opponents. They warned enemy ships before attacking to allow evacuation of non-combatants. They provided medical supplies to damaged vessels. They offered surrender terms even to those who had refused to surrender to them. The breaking point came during the Battle of Proxima Station. Confederation forces had taken control of a civilian space station and were using the inhabitants as human shields. Standard military doctrine was clear. The shields were acceptable losses if the military target could be destroyed. Admiral Karen Walsh commanded the human fleet that arrived to retake the station. She studied the tactical situation for hours while her officers waited for orders. The enemy was using 5,000 civilians to protect their position. Any attack would result in massive loss of innocent life. "Admiral, we could destroy the station with a single missile strike," her weapons officer reported. "The enemy would be eliminated along with their defensive advantage." Walsh looked at the display showing thermal images of families huddled in the station corridors. Children and elderly beings pressed together in fear, while armed soldiers used them as protection. Her response shocked everyone on the bridge. "All ships withdraw to safe distance. We will not attack while civilians are at risk." Her tactical officer stared in disbelief. "Admiral, that gives the enemy time to reinforce their position. We may lose our only chance to retake the station without a prolonged siege." "Then we conduct a prolonged siege," Walsh replied. "We do not kill innocents to make our job easier. That is not who we are." The human fleet pulled back to a safe distance and began broadcasting surrender terms to the enemy forces. They offered safe passage and fair treatment in exchange for release of the civilians. They promised medical care for wounded enemies and legal representation during any trials. Zephyr 9 watched this development with growing confusion. The humans had chosen tactical disadvantage rather than accept civilian casualties. They had given up their best chance for quick victory because their rules prevented them from harming innocents. And then something impossible happened. 3 enemy ships broke formation and surrendered to the human fleet. Their commanders had grown disgusted with their own side's tactics after seeing the alternative offered by the humans. They chose to join forces with beings who fought according to principles instead of pure survival instinct. More ships followed. Within 6 hours, half the enemy fleet had defected to the human side. Not because they were losing the battle, but because they wanted to fight alongside beings who offered something better than endless cycles of violence and revenge. The station was retaken without firing a shot. The civilians were freed unharmed. The enemy commander who had ordered their use as shields found himself isolated and abandoned by his own forces. He surrendered rather than face a battle he could not win. Zephyr 9 sat in his command chair staring at the reports from Proxima Station. The humans had won a complete victory using tactics that should have guaranteed their defeat. They had converted enemies into allies through demonstration of superior values. They had shown that mercy could be a weapon more powerful than any missile or energy beam. His crystalline mind struggled to process the implications. For 300 years he had believed that strength came from the willingness to do whatever was necessary to win. The humans had shown him that real strength came from the willingness to limit yourself even when victory was within reach. They fought according to rules that made them weaker in individual battles but stronger in the larger war for hearts and minds across the galaxy. Their impossible standards were becoming a force that other species could not resist, and Zephyr 9 began to understand that everything he had learned about warfare might be wrong. Commander Zephyr 9 had killed more beings than most planets held in population. His crystalline body reflected the cold light of distant stars as he stood on the bridge of his warship. The massive vessel called Stellar Dominion moved through space like a predator hunting prey. For 300 years he had served the Galactic Confederation, and in all that time no enemy had ever surprised him. The bridge crew worked in perfect silence around him. Each alien wore the dark uniform of the Confederation military. Their movements were precise and efficient. Fear made them careful, and careful soldiers lived longer. Zephyr 9 preferred it this way. Emotions were weakness, and weakness got you killed in the vast emptiness between stars. His sensor officer spoke in a quiet voice. "Commander, we have detected a primitive vessel entering our space." The words hung in the air like smoke. Every crew member knew what came next. They had done this dance 1,000 times before with 1,000 different species. "Show me," Zephyr 9 commanded. The main screen flickered to life and displayed a ship unlike anything in the Confederation database. It was crude by their standards, but large enough to hold thousands of beings. The hull showed signs of long travel through deep space. Scratches and dents marked its surface like scars on old skin. "Analysis," he demanded from his science officer. The female Vorthak studied her instruments with careful attention. "The vessel appears to be a colony ship, Commander. Long-range sensors detect approximately 50,000 life forms aboard. Their technology level suggests they are primitives who have barely mastered faster-than-light travel." Zephyr 9 nodded slowly. Another species that had stumbled into Confederation space without permission, another group that would learn the hard way about galactic law. He had performed this duty so many times it had become routine. The outcome was always the same. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. His communications officer pressed several buttons, and a holographic display showed the connection was active. Zephyr 9 straightened his crystalline form and spoke, with the authority of someone who held the power of life and death. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Galactic Confederation space without authorization. I am Commander Zephyr 9 of the Confederation Navy. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your ship and all aboard. You have 60 seconds to comply." The response should have been immediate: panic, pleas for mercy, offers of tribute or service. Sometimes the primitives tried to fight, and that always ended badly for them. But this time something different happened. The alien vessel responded with a calm female voice that showed no fear at all. "Commander Zephyr 9, this is Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the human colony ship New Hope. We acknowledge your superior firepower and your authority in this region of space. However, we operate under specific rules of engagement that we must follow even in situations like this. We are transmitting several documents for your review. These include the Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions, and our own military codes of conduct. We respectfully request that you examine these materials before taking any hostile action against our vessel." Zephyr 9 stared at the communication display in complete confusion. In 3 centuries of military service, no species had ever responded to a death threat by sending paperwork. His tactical computer began receiving the transmitted files. Page after page of text filled his screen. Laws about warfare, rules about treatment of prisoners, guidelines for protecting civilians. His science officer looked up from her station with an expression of bewilderment. "Commander, these beings appear to have created laws that limit their own military effectiveness. They have rules that prevent them from attacking certain targets and require them to care for enemy wounded." "That is impossible," Zephyr 9 replied. "No species would voluntarily handicap themselves in warfare. Survival demands using every advantage available." But even as he spoke the words, he could see the documents scrolling past on his screen. Hundreds of pages of self-imposed restrictions on military action. The human captain spoke again. "Commander, we understand this may be unusual. Our species has learned through bitter experience that how we fight is just as important as whether we win. These rules help us maintain our humanity, even in the worst circumstances. We hope you will consider them before making your decision." Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat at the communications station aboard the human ship. He could see the fear in the eyes of his fellow crew members, but also something else: determination. They had known this moment might come when they left Earth. The galaxy was a dangerous place filled with species that might not understand human values. Captain Rodriguez stood calm and steady on her bridge. She had served in 3 different wars back on Earth and had seen what happened when civilized beings abandoned their principles. The documents they had sent were more than just rules. They were the foundation of everything that made humans different from animals. "Weapon status?" she asked quietly. Her tactical officer checked his displays and shook his head. "Captain, we have defensive systems only. Our colony ship was never designed for combat." Against that warship we would last perhaps 30 seconds in a direct fight. Rodriguez nodded. She had not expected to win through superior firepower. Humans had always succeeded by being something other than the strongest predator in the jungle. They succeeded by being human. Back on the Confederation warship, Zephyr 9 continued reading the strange documents. The concepts described within them made no logical sense to his crystalline mind. Rules that protected enemies. Laws that limited weapon use. Requirements to provide medical care to those who had been trying to kill you moments before. Commander, his weapons officer said, the primitive vessel is still waiting for a response. Shall I prepare to fire? The question hung in the space between them like a blade ready to fall. Zephyr 9 looked at the human ship on his display. Such a fragile thing compared to his warship. He could destroy it with a single shot from his main batteries. 50,000 lives would end in an instant of fire and metal, but something about those documents troubled him in ways he could not explain. Delay firing, he commanded. I need to study these materials further. His crew exchanged glances but obeyed without question. In 300 years, their commander had never hesitated before destroying a target. The human documents continued scrolling past on his screen. Each page revealed concepts that challenged everything he understood about warfare and survival. These humans had somehow convinced themselves that being merciful made them stronger. That showing restraint was a form of power. It was impossible. It was illogical. It was completely against everything the Confederation had learned about the nature of conflict between species. And yet something, deep in his crystalline mind, whispered that perhaps these strange beings knew something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten.